Each year, hospitals around the world administer morphine to millions of patients in their most desperate moments, after surgeries, during cancer treatment, in the final hours of life. A single 10-milligram ampule, small enough to hold between two fingers, can silence pain so overwhelming that nothing else can touch it. But have you ever stopped to wonder how that tiny glass vial actually gets made? How a flower grown in a field halfway around the world becomes the most powerful painkiller medicine has ever produced? Today, we are tracing that entire journey, from the soil where the opium poppy grows, through heavily guarded chemical plants, all the way to the sterile production lines that turn a raw botanical extract into a life-saving medicine that reaches patients around the world every single day. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover will completely change the way you look at that little vial. The story of morphine is one of the most extraordinary in the history of medicine. For at least 7,000 years, humans had already understood that the opium poppy held something remarkable inside it. Ancient Sumerians called it the joy plant. Egyptians used it to quiet crying children. For millennia, raw opium, the thick, sticky resin scraped from the surface of poppy seed pods, was the only painkiller civilization possessed. The problem was always dosage. Physicians had no way of knowing how much active substance was in any given batch of raw opium, making it as dangerous as it was effective. That changed in 1804, when a young German pharmacist's apprentice named Friedrich Sertürner began conducting experiments on the chemical components of opium in his spare time. Working methodically, he dissolved opium in acid and then neutralized it with ammonia, isolating a crystalline substance unlike anything that had been seen before. He named it Morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams. He then did something that would horrify any modern ethics committee. He tested it on himself and 3 young boys, nearly killing all 4 of them in the process. But the results were undeniable. Sertürner had isolated the first pure alkaloid ever extracted from a plant, a compound 6 times more potent than raw opium, and one that could finally be measured in exact, controllable doses. Merck began manufacturing it commercially in 1827. When the hypodermic syringe was invented in 1853, morphine's reach exploded. It was injected into soldiers by the hundreds of thousands during the American Civil War and both world wars that followed, earning the grim nickname soldier's disease as addiction rates soared among veterans who had been given it freely on the battlefield. Today, morphine remains irreplaceable. Every year, legal pharmaceutical manufacturers produce around 500 tons of it globally, but roughly 70% of that production is immediately converted into other opioids, hydromorphone, oxymorphone, and codeine among them, because morphine is the chemical backbone of half the opioid medicines in existence. The countries authorized to grow and process legal opium poppies are tightly controlled by international treaty. Australia, India, Turkey, France, and Spain together account for the vast majority of the world's legal supply, each operating under strict quotas monitored by the United Nations. Everything begins in the field. The plant at the center of this entire industry is Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy, an annual plant that thrives in dry, warm climates with well-drained soil. In Tasmania, Australia, one of the world's most important legal production zones, entire valleys turn violet and white each spring as enormous fields of poppies bloom across the landscape. The active compounds, including morphine, accumulate in the milky white latex contained within the immature seed capsule just below the flower petals. In illegal production, workers lance each pod individually with a multi-bladed tool, allowing the white latex to bleed out and air dry into a dark, gummy resin that is then scraped off by hand, the raw opium of history. Legal pharmaceutical producers have modernized the process entirely. Once the poppies have matured and the seeds have ripened, industrial combine harvesters move through the fields, cutting the entire plant at the base. The dried seed pods, stems, and leaves, collectively called poppy straw, are baled and transported by truck and ship to processing facilities. Poppy straw contains far less morphine by weight than hand-harvested raw opium, but mechanized harvesting makes it dramatically cheaper and safer to handle at industrial scale. At the processing plant, the real chemical work begins. Incoming poppy straw is first inspected and tested for alkaloid content, then fed into industrial shredders and hammer mills that pulverize the dried material into a coarse powder, vastly increasing the surface area available for extraction. That powder is loaded into enormous stainless steel extraction tanks, each capable of holding several tons of material, where it is mixed with hot water and treated with calcium hydroxide, a base that selectively reacts with morphine to form a compound called calcium morphinate, drawing it out of the plant material and into solution while leaving most other organic matter behind. The liquid is then separated from the solid plant waste using industrial filter presses, producing a dark, alkaloid-rich filtrate. This raw extract is far from pure. It contains codeine, thebaine, noscapine, papaverine, and dozens of other compounds alongside the morphine. To isolate morphine specifically, the filtrate is treated with ammonium chloride, which causes the morphine to precipitate out of solution as a solid. This crude morphine base is filtered off, then redissolved in dilute hydrochloric acid and treated again with activated charcoal, which absorbs residual color compounds and non-alkaloid impurities. Multiple controlled rounds of recrystallization follow, each cycle dissolving and reprecipitating the morphine and exploiting its specific solubility to shed more of the remaining trace alkaloids. By the end of this process, the morphine purity has climbed to around 95%, a product the industry calls technical morphine. The 95% is still not good enough for medicine. The technical morphine is transferred to a second facility operating under pharmaceutical-grade conditions, where a final series of purification steps drives purity to 99% or higher. Here, the morphine is reacted with sulfuric acid to convert it into morphine sulfate, its most stable and medically used form. The resulting white crystalline powder is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the API, that will go into every product the factory ships. The final stage is formulation. For injectable morphine, the gold standard for acute pain management, the morphine sulfate powder is dissolved in precisely measured quantities of sterile water inside clean rooms, where the air is filtered to hospital-grade standards, pressure-controlled, and continuously monitored for contamination. The solution is mixed with stabilizing agents and passed through submicron membrane filters to guarantee complete sterility. Automated filling machines then draw the solution into glass ampules with nanogram-level dosing accuracy. Each ampule is flame-sealed, individually inspected by cameras and optical sensors for particles or defects, and then autoclaved, subjected to high-pressure steam, to achieve terminal sterilization. The finished ampoules are labeled, batch-coded, and packed into locked, tamper-evident packaging before being shipped to hospitals and pharmacies under tightly controlled conditions. Every single gram of morphine produced, stored, transferred, and eventually destroyed must be logged and reported under the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, a United Nations treaty that subjects legal morphine manufacturers to a level of regulatory scrutiny matched by almost no other substance on Earth. Dedicated security teams, vault-grade storage, armed transport, and real-time inventory tracking are not optional. They are legally mandated conditions of operation. The result of all that effort, the fields, the chemistry, the clean rooms, the regulation, is a medicine of almost miraculous precision. What once required farmers to crawl through poppy fields before dawn with curved scraping knives is now a tightly choreographed industrial process spanning multiple continents, governed by international law and producing a drug that, in the right hands and the right dose, can be the difference between unbearable suffering and a dignified, peaceful end. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories through Stories Behind Everything.